Bata Manga.
My name is Tanami. I'm out with my high school friend, full-time worker, and mother, Nanako. It has been about a year since we last met. Hey, Nanako. Been a minute.
I've been so busy. Thanks for coming out. I have a lot I want to talk about, so I'm gonna keep you hostage for a while.
We went to a bar that I regularly went to and started drinking. So, what is it that you wanted to talk about?
Well...
Nanako lived in a house near the apartments I lived in with her husband and her 3-year-old son. There was a kindergarten nearby and it was a great place to raise kids.
Ah, good morning, Nanako-san. You're working today too? Must be tough with both parents working.
And this was Dorumi. She lived 2 houses down. She was considered a sort of a boss character amongst the mothers, and everyone was always kissing her ass. The houses were all pretty open, so you could see the inside of the yard fairly easily, but Nanako would often see the moms at Dorumi's yard, with their kids playing ball or running around. When Nanako moved here, she went to say hello to Dorumi.
Is your child in daycare? We all make our kids go to kindergarten. I'm sure our kids won't be able to play much since we're going to be on different days.
Well, that was her first impression, so she wasn't very good with Dorumi. To make things worse, the water and electricity were extremely expensive after they moved. They were in the same city, so it shouldn't really change, but it was at least twice as expensive as before. One day...
My head hurts this morning. Can you send him off to daycare today?
Sure, you got plenty of PTO. Why don't you just take it off? Relax.
Maybe it was stress from the move, but she felt sick, so she took medicine and went to bed. After they left, Nanako was falling asleep when she heard sounds coming from outside. The kindergarten was in summer break, so maybe Dorumi had invited friends over or something. She didn't really think much of it. About an hour later, she woke up and felt much better. She was about to get out of bed when she heard a large bang on a window. What? What the hell was that? Nanako was afraid, so she slowly crept to the window to peek outside. She noticed that all of the neighborhood kids were in her yard. They had even put a small pool out. The hose was coming from the tap outside. Some kids were on the wooden deck outside, soaking the table and chairs, playing games and seeing who could spit their seats farther. The pool had a small ball, and there was a clear mark on the window of a ball hitting the window. It was most likely that ball. Dorumi and 4 other groups of moms were all there in their little camping chairs, talking and having fun. They even had a bunch of chargers plugged into the wall, and they were charging their phones.
I'm so glad we found a yard that we can use when we wanted. You're so incredible, Dorumi-san! I didn't know unlimited applied to water, not just phone data. Oh, let's bring out the hot plate during lunch and have a nice little yakiniku. I don't want to bring charcoal and burn the yard. I was worried last year, but I'm sure she won't notice. She's always out at work and never comes home till it's dark. If she smells charcoal, we can just say that we had a barbecue in our yard.
She heard that conversation in her yard and the kids started having water balloon fights. The yard was filling up with bits and pieces of water balloons. The water was running the whole time. The moms weren't scolding the kids at all. Well, they of course didn't try to stop the water either. That's why the water bill was so high. She was so furious. She backed away from the window and went upstairs before calling the cops.
There are people who are trespassing in my yard, so please come right away.
She took her phone and started recording from upstairs. The police showed up quickly. The mothers were all surprised by the siren and stood up. The kids were excited about the police car.
We received a call of trespassing at this residence. Do any of you live here?
Dorumi and the group were clearly shaken up. The police were extremely suspicious of their behavior, so they rang the doorbell. She opened the door to answer the police, and Dorumi jumped up in surprise.
What? Why are you here? I thought you went to work!
Are you the resident of this house?
Yes, here's my license and my address.
The police officer checked the license, and she showed her recordings.
These people had no right to enter my property. I think you can look it up, but they've been doing this for 3 years now. They've been using my power and water.
Doremi and her little group were all pale blue.
No, you said we could use the yard freely, right, guys?
Doremi turned to her little group of moms, but they were terrified to lie in front of a police officer, so they just fell silent.
I've never said such a thing. Did we have some kind of contract? Something that you can definitively show as proof that I gave you permission?
Doremi fell silent at how angry Nanako was. Doremi and friends were all loaded into a car and taken to the station. Afterwards, Nanako hired a lawyer and filed a formal report. In return for canceling the charges against them, she was asking for 3 years' worth of electricity and utility charges. They still didn't seem to understand the hot water they were in, so she sent them legal documents. 2 of the moms immediately came for settlement, but Doremi and her friend had completely lost touch with reality.
Come on, we're neighbors. Let's get along.
And they were insane. They brought some snacks and tried to call it a day.
Sure. Let's take it to court to make it clear how friendly we all are then.
Their husbands showed up shortly after, dragging their wives to apologize. Doremi was still too proud to look Nanako in the face and apologize. She was looking away the whole time while apologizing. As a result, Doremi and her best friend got a divorce. They both agreed that there was no way they could live with a crazy wives like them. Because of their past, the courts gave full custody to the fathers. The other 2 had their mother-in-laws move in with them to watch over their every move. They also paid Nanako back for all the water and utility bills over 3 years. I can't believe it! I remember your water bill being really high.
Yeah, I'm actually doing pretty good now after receiving extra money for damages. I'll buy today.
Yay! Thank you. Wait, do I need to sign a contract or something?
You're a friend, so no. You've listened to me vent for a while.
I'm glad everything worked out. There are good people in the neighborhood, but there are some people like Doremi who are insane too. It was definitely a vicarious learning experience.
When I was a junior in high school, my dad passed away. My mum was in the hospital at the time, and she passed away a few months after that. She was fighting cancer for years, and I had 2 little brothers, so money was tight. I decided to get a job right after high school to support my family. After our parents died, our grandparents took us in. Looking after 3 teenage boys couldn't have been easy, but they never complained once.
Eat up.
I'm gonna start working right after high school. Don't worry about money. Go to college. And they even offered to pay for my education. But they were almost retired. There was no way they could put us all through college. So I politely declined the offer. A few years later, I graduated from high school. Then I moved out of the city, got a good job, and got to work. I sent money to my grandparents every month for more than 10 years. My grandparents were always worried about me. You don't have to do this. We'll be fine. Go live your life. They said to me every time I came home. But I didn't stop. It was the least I could do. Then, my younger brother. I want to go to college. So he went on to college. He even went to graduate school afterwards. My youngest brother went to college as well. Then, a year later, I got a call. My second older brother was getting married. But then, he said he didn't want me there. He was embarrassed that I wasn't a college graduate. And he was mad at me too. Growing up, I always paid more attention to my youngest brother, and he didn't like that. That was true, but that's only because my mum was always at the hospital. He was a baby at the time. Someone had to take care of him. And the thing is, I paid for half of his tuition, so this made me really upset. My grandparents got furious when they heard about this. I even paid for his graduate school, so... But, as it turns out, he just wanted to go to college to party. He only went on to graduate school so he could party for another 2 years. So basically, he used me. And now he was telling me to screw off. My grandparents told him to pay me back for all the money I spent on him. And my youngest brother tried to talk to him as well. What's wrong with you? He put you through college. But it was no use. His mind was made up. And once he decides something, he never changed his mind. He's always been stubborn like this. I worked my arse off for years to put him through college. I didn't even know what to think anymore. But then, something unexpected happened. His fiancé's parents found out about what he said to me. They always wondered how he was putting himself through college, so one day they asked him. So he told them that I was supporting the family after our parents died, so they knew about me. They were really touched by his story. They were looking forward to meeting me at the wedding. But now, he was saying he didn't want me there, because I wasn't a college graduate. And when they found out, they got furious. They told him he couldn't marry their daughter anymore. But then, he blamed me for it. They called the marriage off. It's all your fault. I wasn't sure what to tell him. At this point, I didn't care anymore. You did this to yourself. Screw you. That's what you get for disrespecting me like that. But it's true. You didn't go to college. I don't want you embarrassing me at my wedding. Embarrass you? How? I went to a graduate school. I don't want people finding out I got a brother who didn't even go to college. Seriously. I got a job right after high school to put you through school. You realise that, right? And you only wanted to go so you can party. Unbelievable. Shut up! I never asked you to do this, and you never told me money was tight. I was speechless. I worked like crazy for years for my family, but he didn't give a crap. No wonder my grandparents couldn't convince him. Fine, I've heard enough. I should have never wasted all that money on you. I want it back. All of it. Huh? I can't do that. I don't have that kind of money. Then stop complaining. If you're going to complain, pay me back first. Otherwise, keep your damn mouth shut. He went silent after that. I guess he was finally starting to realise that he messed up. College was very expensive these days, and he didn't have nearly enough money to pay me back. Then, get the hell out of our house. After everything your brother did for you, don't ever come back here again. My grandparents kicked him out of the house. And my youngest brother. He worked his ass off to pay for your education. What the hell is wrong with you? Seriously? You're unbelievable. You know that. You make me sick, he said to him. Then, his ex-fiancée.
I was looking forward to meet your brother. I knew the things he did for you. So, and same with my parents. But you ruined everything. You're a horrible person. I'm just glad that I realized that before it was too late.
And she left him for good. He called me a few days later. Please tell everyone that we're cool now. Please, I'm going to lose everything. Why would I help you? I don't care about you anymore. Screw you. Oh, come on, I'm your little brother. You're the one that betrayed me. You're dead to me. Don't ever call me again. Please, you're all I got now. He kept begging me, but my mind was made up. I wanted nothing to do with him. I wasn't asking him to thank me for the things I did for him, and I never once regretted my decision to start working right after high school. But after everything he said to me, I never wanted to see him again. I decided to cut all ties with him, and everyone else in the family did the same. He had nothing now. Sucks for him, but he did this to himself. I basically raised him after our parents died, so I felt partially responsible for the way he turned out, but he's a grown man now, so not my problem. Anyways, I'm glad everything worked out.
In the 4th grade, I was walking down a street with my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, to go buy candy. Then, from up ahead, we saw an old lady who lived in the neighborhood cross the crosswalk without a light. Then I saw a bike running, and it ran over my grandma right in front of me and my sister. It was a split second, and me and my sister couldn't move for a while, like time had stopped. But the next moment, I was so startled and ran toward the lady with my old sister, but the bike had already fled. Grandma's body jerked from the shock of being run over. But being in elementary school, my sister and I didn't know what to do, so we yelled out, "An old lady has been hit! Someone, please come!" We repeated. Then the neighbors heard us and
What's going on? It's the old lady from 2nd Street.
and came running out. The old lady was hit by a motorcycle.
What, by a motorcycle? I'll call an ambulance right away.
And when the ambulance arrived shortly after, the old lady was taken away and then the police came.
What condition was she in? Did you see the face of the person who hit the lady?
They asked us a lot of questions, but we couldn't talk because we were crying so much. I was so shocked by the scene that I vaguely remember it, partly because it was the first time in my life that I had ever seen a person get run over. The policeman, seeing how we were still in elementary school,
I'm sorry. You can go home now. Thanks for your help.
he kindly said. Later, I was told that the old lady died in the hospital where she was taken, though I don't know if it was because she was hit badly or if it was shock-related. When my sister and I were told about it, we were shocked and speechless, because even though we were elementary school students, we knew what it meant for a person to die. And we knew the old lady from our neighborhood, and when we saw her watering her plants on the way to school, "Have a good day, and be careful," she kindly called out to us. I couldn't believe that person was no longer here. The bike that hit the old lady seemed to be running away and was never caught after all. The night I went home, I myself was still in shock from the accident, but my sister was even more shocked and she wouldn't say a word or eat her food. "Oh, I hope she's okay."
It's understandable. We just saw an old lady get run over right in front of their eyes.
Yeah, it's no wonder they're in shock.
We're gonna have to be there for them.
Yeah. My parents were worried, but PTSD wasn't even a word back then, and there was a huge prejudice against mental illnesses. Thank you for the food. Because people thought you were crazy if you went to the hospital. There was no such option to take my sister or me, who were in elementary school. But in the middle of the night, when my sister started crying uncontrollably and everyone was in a state of panic, she suddenly said something shocking. To our surprise, my sister saw the person who was driving the bike that hit the old lady. Our parents were shocked as well. The hit-and-run driver who hit the old lady had not been found yet, and the investigation was still ongoing.
Who was it? Who ran over the old lady?
We asked her, but at first, she seemed reluctant to say anything. But my mother, "Please tell us, don't you feel sorry for the old lady if we don't find out who ran over her?" And then, my sister in a slow, small voice, "It was Ako's mom," she said. Everyone was stunned when they heard the name. In fact, Ako was the mother of my sister's friend in the neighborhood. Apparently, shortly before the incident, my sister, "This is the bike that my mom bought." And when she went to Ako's house, Ako showed it to her. She remembered it because it was a flashy color and not like any other bike around here. And my sister saw her face right when the bike hit the old lady. "It's Ako's mom." At the time, there was no requirement to wear helmets, and most people were not wearing them. My sister couldn't say what she saw when the ambulance and the policeman came, because her friend's mom would be taken away by the police if she testified to what she saw. She was still in the 2nd grade, which made it even scarier for her. I later heard that our parents were also very distressed that day when they heard this. Of course, this should have been reported to the police immediately, but the victim and the assailant were from the same town, and the children were close acquaintances. But after some thought, our parents told the police. In hindsight, whether you reported it or not, it was still rare for women to ride bikes at the time, and I don't think Japanese police would let a hit-and-run criminal who lived in your neighborhood go free. I remember soon after that, Ako's family house became vacant and was put up for sale. I was still in elementary school at the time, so I just thought my sister's friend moved out, but many years later, it came as a topic of conversation as a memory. And then my sister and I were surprised to hear from our mother that Ako's dad was quite the delinquent.
Old people have families waiting for them to die anyway, so it's better for them to die early so they can get the insurance money. If anything, they should be thanking us. Why would you call the cops?
And came barging into our house. My mother was terrified at the time, and she was glad we weren't there. But my mother immediately consulted the police, and as a result, it seems that Ako's father was also taken in by the police on suspicion of making threats. It was a surprise finding out her mother and father were arrested, and Ako was taken in by her grandmothers because we thought Ako just moved away without knowing anything about it. My mother was told by some of the neighbors, "Your daughters were friends, right? How could you turn her in when you knew her mother too? You're so cold-blooded. Who knows what's behind that heart?" She was said such heartless things. My mother didn't tell us, partly because we were so young. But I knew my parents were distressed, and it's not like they turned her in with joy. And for the old lady's relatives, there's nothing more frustrating than when your family loses a loved one in a hit and run, and the perpetrator is never found. I became angry when I learned that people said things like that to my mother, even though the years had already gone by. But after they found out that Ako's mom was the one who committed the hit and run, the old lady's family came to see her.
Thank you so much. Now the whole family can send my mother off to heaven together.
They cried and thanked her. My mother and father who saw those tears said they did the right thing even though people point fingers behind their backs and were even threatened by Ako's dad. The old lady's family also knew that my mother and father were not well spoken by some of the people, and
just the fact that a young child still in 2nd grade telling the truth saved us. Why is the criminal who ran away being defended and the honest one being beaten? That's not right.
And apparently, they talked to everyone around them. The people who originally said things like that were neighbors who were friends with Ako's mom, so the people around them agreed with them and calmed down. By the way, my sister rarely cried in the middle of the night after she confided that it was Ako's mom who ran over the old lady. Maybe that's how much conflict and stress she was feeling inside. Now my sister and I are grown. We're out of the house and living in separate places, but I still go back home when the old lady's family sees us.
Oh, you're back after a long time.
Yes, it's summer holidays, so...
I see. I remember every year when summer holiday comes. Thank you so much for that time.
They tell us. I guess the truth was too cruel and too heavy for my elementary school sister at that time. But I will be forever proud of the fact that my sister's courage at the time saved the old lady's family.
I divorced when my son was very young. I've raised him single-handedly ever since. I couldn't attend his school visits because of my work, and I was too busy on weekends to take him out. I cut back on living expenses, and when my son was about to graduate from high school... Here, this is 3.5 million, so use it for college tuition. I really wanted to give you more, but I'm sorry. This is all I have.
What, Mom? Where did you get this much money?
I've been saving every bit of it since you were little.
Thanks, Mom.
My son teared up. Because of our poor finances, my son probably gave up on applying to college. So he was genuinely happy that he got that chance. My son's grades were good from a young age, so he had a good chance of getting into college if there were no financial issues. I was so happy to see the look on my son's face, because I felt that all the hard work I had done for a really long time had paid off. Good luck with your college entrance exams. And so, my son was able to successfully enter a famous private university. The scholarship was enough to cover the shortfall besides the money I had saved up, and my son graduated from college with flying colors. After that, he was able to get a job at a well-known company in Tokyo, although he contacted me less often than he was in college, probably because he was busy. I was happy to have him call me once in a while to make small talk, but one day I received a call from him. Hello? Long time no see. How's your new job in Tokyo?
Yeah, it's going well. I'm getting married.
Married? That's great. What's she like? What about her parents?
She's the daughter of the president of a big company. It's not my company, but
Wow, I see. Good for you. So, when's the wedding?
I'm sorry, but I don't want you to come to my wedding.
What? What do you mean?
Their parents are a different class than you. You know what I mean.
It's a wedding, right? Are you going to have a wedding without the parents?
No, I'm gonna make sure they're there. There are services for that now.
What kind of service is that? I'm your mother. How can anyone else be your mother?
Shut up. Low-income parents are embarrassing. That's why I'm telling you not to come to my wedding.
I am mortified by my own son's words. Because even though I've made him lonely from an early age, I've saved up money to send him to college. I never would have thought that my son would call me an embarrassment. I see. That's what you mean. Well, Mom is poor, all right. Make sure it's a nice wedding.
Yeah.
My son hangs up after a curt reply. Tears welled up and wouldn't stop. I wonder what I've been working so hard for. I never knew he hated me so much. Where did I go wrong in raising him? I couldn't stop crying when I thought about it. My world went blank when my only son rejected me, and for a month or so, I didn't have the will to live. An old friend of mine. Then why don't you live for yourself from now on? When she told me that, I started to look forward. Then with the recommendations from my friend, I worked hard to get qualifications that would be advantageous for me to live. I can forget about my son as long as I study hard. Besides, there are all kinds of people at the school, so I had more opportunities to interact with people. After a year of living like that, I had completely moved on with my life, until one day, I heard from my son who I had not heard from a long time.
Hello, Mom.
It's been a while.
There's something I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh, what a coincidence. Me too. I got remarried, actually.
What? With who?
The president of Drop Corporation. I was studying for a qualification and I started seeing him often when he was dropping off and picking up her daughter.
That's great! Drop Corporation is one of the best companies in Tokyo.
That's right. So, what's your story?
Well, my marriage got called off. It's terrible, right? As soon as she found out I didn't invite you to the wedding, she said she couldn't marry someone with no filial piety. I spent so much money on her. Now I'm in a lot of debt. And I'm glad. If my mom remarried the president of Drop Corporation, I could pay back $5 million in no time.
What are you talking about? I put you through college and you got a job, so you can pay it back if you work, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And your fiancé was a decent person. It's you who's been wrong from the beginning. A compassionate woman like her doesn't suit someone like you who lies. I've never even met them, but I'm sure she'll find a better man.
What are you talking about? Your son is in trouble, and being on the edge like this, I can't hang out.
No need to hang out. Why should I pay for something you spent yourself? You're an adult.
You can't talk to me like that.
You made your own mother disappear, didn't you? We're having a modest wedding, by the way. But you don't have to come. I can't introduce a son who's only after my inheritance.
But I'm your son.
And I have a daughter now. It's his daughter. But unlike you, she's very thoughtful and nice, you know. My son is gone, but I am very happy to have a beautiful daughter. So don't call me anymore, okay?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, please forgive me.
I'm sorry, but I don't remember raising someone who can't even own up to their own deeds. Don't contact me until you face yourself, work properly and pay off your debts. Goodbye. My son was calling me on the other end of the phone, but I hung up anyway. I'm not actually trying to cut him off, but even if I reached out to my son now, it wouldn't do him any good. Whatever reason my son has for getting into debt, I will not keep in touch with him until he pays back the debt he has created for himself. If he changes his mind, I will be able to see him reform in a few years. And if nothing changes, I can accept it for what it is and give up. If I told my husband about this, he would probably say 2 words and try to help my son. But that wouldn't make sense. As I told my son, my new daughter has a really good heart. As a newcomer to the school who just couldn't shake the complex that I was poor, she was the first one to speak to me and teach me carefully. She also told me that since her own mother was gone, she would be happy just talking to someone my age. I cried in front of my daughter because she reminded me of my son. Whatever happens, he's not a little boy anymore, and I want him to take proper responsibility for his own life. And hopefully, he will return to being a kind-hearted person like my daughter. It was Christmas season. There were Christmas lights all over the town, and it was freezing out, but everyone was walking around with a big warm smile. Oh well, everyone except for me. I hated Christmas. It reminds me of something terrible that had happened to me years ago. I was in 2nd grade at the time. It was Christmas Eve. I was out with my family. We were going out to a nice restaurant. We were waiting at this intersection.
You think Santa will come?
Yeah, but only if you've been a good girl.
Oh, Satsuki, don't worry. I'm sure Santa will come. You're the sweetest girl ever.
Yeah? Yay!
I was having a great time with my family, but then someone pushed my mom from behind. She went flying towards the road and got hit by a car. It all happened so fast.
She got run over. Call 911.
People started to panic. My dad and my brother rushed over to her. I couldn't move though. I just stood there, crying. Then, one of the guys behind me grabbed the guy who pushed her. Then, the driver came out.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She just came out of nowhere.
Then he fell to the ground and started crying. Someone called 911 for us. A few minutes later, the cop arrived. The guy who pushed her was screaming. I couldn't believe this was happening to me.
Mom, please don't die.
I ran towards Mom as they carried her into the ambulance. Dad pulled me away from her. I couldn't stop crying. Then the cops arrested the guy who pushed her. The next day, there was an article about the accident on the newspaper, but it just said a woman in her 30s got run over by a car. It didn't say anything about the guy who pushed her. The guy who did it was a total stranger. He didn't even know my mom. He used to be homeless or something. After Mom came home from the hospital, these guys from the homeless support group came over to our house. They started telling me about the guy who pushed my mom. He was a local business owner, but his company went under a few years ago. He got a new job right afterwards to pay off his debt, but he got fired in less than a year. He had to get a job, but the economy was rough, and he was already in his 50s. He couldn't find work anywhere. He was unemployed and got up to his neck in debt now. His wife and daughter left him soon afterwards. He decided to make a run for it. He started living at one of those internet cafes, but soon he ran out of money and he had no choice but to live out on the streets. He built a small shed near the river and spent the next few years there. Then, the guys from the homeless support group found him and took him in. So, why did he push my mom into the street? According to him, he did it because he felt lonely. But it was Christmas season, and there were happy families everywhere, and this pissed him off. And my mom, she reminded him of his ex-wife. That's why he chose her. He knew it wasn't her, but he didn't care. But then, the guys from the support group said to us,
Look, he's a victim in all this too. Will you settle? Yeah, please give him another chance.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The guy was charged with attempted murder, so he was going to jail for sure. But if we settle, they were willing to reduce the sentence to 3 years or so. My mom was fine, by the way. She had a thick coat on and a thick scarf around her neck, so she went unconscious for a bit, but it was nothing serious. She only had to stay at the hospital for 3 days. Then, one of the guys said,
Look, you got a loving family, and you were able to come home in 3 days. But him? He's got nothing. And if you don't settle, you might end up in jail for 5 years or more. If that happens, he'll never be able to get back on his feet, so please, give him another chance.
He started begging us to settle. Then my dad said to him,
You guys got a family too, right? Would you say the same thing if he came after your wife? Will you still give this guy another chance, huh?
He asked them. They paused for a second, then said,
But your wife, she was fine. I'm just saying.
He mumbled under his breath. My dad finally lost it.
How dare you! Get the hell out! Never come here again!
My dad never raised his voice like this. We were in the other room, but we could hear him loud and clear. He kicked them out of the house. Then,
Get me some salt!
he asked my brother to grab some salt from the kitchen. He threw them at them on their way out. I was watching the entire thing from my room upstairs. For some reason, I couldn't stop crying. And my dad and my brother, they were crying too. Mom was really upset too. She stayed in her room for the rest of the day. The guys from the support group never came to our house after that. Needless to say, we didn't agree to any deals. We pressed full charges. The guy got sent to prison for a very long time. Personally, I think it was way too short, but whatever. I was just glad that he was gone. We were relieved, but then something unexpected happened. We started getting these hate messages. She probably did something to deserve it. Get out of this town, you slut. And it went on and on like that. Then it got worse. Someone started shoving garbage in our mailbox, and this one time, someone put a dead cat in there. This went on for a while, but a month later, they finally caught the guy who was doing all of this. My dad caught him red-handed. He found him putting up hate messages on our door one evening. It was that guy from the homeless support group.
I did nothing wrong. All I asked was to give him another chance, but they pressed full charges.
He said to the cops. A few months later, the homeless support group got dissolved. Not sure why exactly. I heard rumors that they always went a bit too far with their cause, so maybe that's why. Fast forward 20 years, I still had flashbacks from time to time during Christmas season, but this year, it was different, and I knew why. I was about to have a baby, and I was due on Christmas Eve. For the first time in 20 years, I had something to look forward to on Christmas. I am Tanako, married to my husband for 3 years, but we have no children. My mother-in-law blamed me for that as if it was my fault, and I was undergoing fertility treatment. But the treatment was much harder than I thought it would be, and I was in a lot of pain physically and emotionally. Then I found out that my husband was cheating on me, which was a shock. But what surprised me even more was what happened after that. My husband, of all people, gleefully told me about the affair.
Hey, rejoice! We're having a baby.
Huh? What are you talking about?
I said we're having a baby.
I'm not pregnant. What kind of crazy nonsense are you talking about?
We're having our baby. You don't need fertility treatments anymore.
What the hell have you been saying? I don't understand. I'm not pregnant.
Yeah, it's not yours, it's Aiko's child.
I was stunned for a while by the words that came out of my husband's mouth one after another. But it became clear that he was cheating on me. And then he had a child with her, which he was so happy to tell me about it. I was suffering so much from the treatment, and you were cheating on me? I can't believe it. But my husband shows no signs of being sorry.
You're not the only one in pain. Don't make yourself look like you're the only one in pain.
It was your mother who told me to have treatment. She didn't even give me any support.
I'm sure my mother would love to see her grandchildren, wouldn't she? But you don't have to do it anymore, so be happy.
My husband cheated on me and had a baby with another woman. What am I supposed to be happy about?
What, you couldn't have kids, so I made them for you.
What the hell is wrong with you?
But I'm right, and now that I have a child, it means you were the one who was infertile, right?
My husband's words left me speechless. Sure, the fact that my husband was able to have a child means that I was the cause, but I never thought I would be informed of this through my husband's cheating.
So I'll bring Aiko next time. Treat her well, okay?
Are you kidding me? Why are you bringing her to my house?
There's a kid in her stomach, and Aiko lives in a small apartment.
Oh, so you're gonna make me live with the woman you cheated on with? You're out of your mind.
This is only right to have her give birth to a healthy baby. Aiko's gonna give birth for you.
What is my husband saying? Is he crazy? I seriously thought so. How would my mother-in-law feel about something like this?
Oh, there's nothing to worry about. What do you mean?
Great! Are you kidding me? The child of an adulterer, and she's overjoyed about it? I can't believe my mother-in-law would allow that, on top of cheating. I felt myself being thrust into despair. There's no way she's going to give her own baby to us in the first place. It's not an object.
Yeah, there's no problems there too. She said she doesn't want a child, but until she gives birth, she's going to have to live here freely. Let's give her a congratulatory gift after the baby is born to show appreciation.
Where would you find that kind of money?
It's in your bank book.
Hey, that's money I saved when I was single. Why should I give it to a stranger?
She's not a stranger. She's moving here soon. Besides, she's carrying my child. You could at least give her some of the money you've been saving.
It's no use talking. Okay, let's just break up. I'm sick of you. I'm sick of your parents.
What are you talking about? Then who's going to raise the child?
I don't know. Why don't you let that woman Akko raise them?
She doesn't want to be a parent. Why not? You get to raise the kid.
What's the joy of raising an adulterous child? Ugh. I didn't think I was going to get anywhere talking to this guy anymore, so I just packed up my stuff and left the house. And then I explained it to my parents, and they were furious.
That's no way for a human being to behave. Get a divorce and come home.
I was back at my parents' house and my mother-in-law called. Hey, what's wrong with you? My son is giving you a child and you're getting divorced? What are you thinking? You are so ungrateful. That's my line. You're in the wrong no matter how you look at it. Your son is even letting the woman he had an affair with live in the house. Of course, she is carrying my son's precious child in her belly. You know, if you can't get pregnant, you can at least take care of him. She was the same as my husband. Talking to my mother-in-law made my head hurt. Anyway, please do whatever you want with this person. Akko and your child. I'm already divorcing my husband and I will charge him alimony afterwards, so... Huh? You're the useless woman who can't even have children. Both my mother-in-law and my husband were gouging at my heart, and my spirit was on the verge of collapse. But then I found out something I never expected. A short time later...
Hey, come back home. Aiko's already living here, you know. We need someone to take care of her.
I told you I'm not going to. Besides, the divorce is already in the works.
Are you still talking like that? You're the one who got us into this mess because you're incapable of having children.
Don't justify your affair. And that Ako? Is she really pregnant with your child?
What are you talking about? Don't backbite me just because you can't have kids.
Okay, I'm not backbiting. I'm just telling you the truth.
What the hell have you been saying all this time?
I just found out that the other day the results of your previous tests, you have azoospermia, which means you can't have children.
What are you talking about? Me? How's that possible? She's pregnant, for Christ's sake.
I know you don't want to believe it, but there's a medical report. Why don't you go to the hospital and ask for more information?
That's nonsense. Then whose child is Aiko pregnant with?
Oh, Ako. She recently separated from her husband, but she's married to begin with, right? She was living in the apartment with her husband right before she moved into the apartment. Of course I have proof. I checked in with the investigators.
Aiko was a married woman?
Well, if it's not your child, isn't it her husband's? They were living in an old apartment and he had more money than him, so she probably decided to switch. She can date you while she has the baby and lets me raise it.
No!
I hung up the phone as he screamed. Then, as I had predicted, Ako was an ex-married woman, and she had one with her husband at the same time she was having an affair with my husband. My husband's azoospermia means that the child is definitely her husband's child, and it seems that Ako was kicked out of the house.
Get out!
And I naturally demanded alimony from my husband and Ako, who were having an affair this time. My husband's in-laws also treated me unfairly, so I sued them all together. But I had all the evidence I needed and easily won the case. The in-laws seemed to be in a state of despair after learning that their only son cannot have children.
You're all I have. We can build a happy family even if we don't have children, so let's start over again, as lovers.
And my husband sends me Romeo mails, but I ignored all of them. Ha, deleted. I don't want anything to do with them ever again. And now I'm living at my home with my parents. Fortunately or unfortunately, I have my alimony in hand, and I'm going to find my new happiness this time. My sister-in-law has twin boys who are 5 years old. They're very, very in the middle of being a child, and you'd swear they have an infinite source of energy. I, on the other hand, am 6 months pregnant, and I cannot play with them at all. One day, I was called up to my husband's parents' house, and while my mother-in-law was doing some chores, I had some tea with my sister-in-law. We ran out of tea, so my sister-in-law moved. You just stay there. I'll go get us some more tea. She ran into the kitchen. Her kids were rough, but she was very kind and had always taken great care of me after I came to this house. I couldn't say the same about my mother-in-law. My morning sickness was really bad, so I really couldn't help out around the house, and she would often come around me to say, "You're skipping out on chores again? You don't work and you don't do chores. What the hell are you good for?" She loved to nag. Of course, my husband was furious about that and told her that she was no longer allowed into our house. She calmed down a little bit more, but as soon as my morning sickness started calming down, "You can move now, right? Come on, go buy me this." She started treating me like a slave. It was true though. I did feel better, so I wanted to make sure I could pull my own weight. However, that's when I was called to the house. My sister-in-law was going to be there too, so I said, sure. After a walk into the house for a while, I was actually enjoying myself talking to my grandma about pregnancy and things I could do to make things easier. It was really rare and nice. But then my sister-in-law's kids came running in, grinning, and "Get it!" kicked my stomach. What? Oh, what the hell? I was shocked and deflected their kick, so it hit my thigh, but my mother-in-law said, "Wow, you guys are so energetic. You got this. Get it!" She was smirking the whole time. Now reinvigorated by their audience, they started really kicking me. They kept kicking me in the back. "Get rid of the criminal!" Wait, hang on. Stop them. I don't know why she was just sitting there watching them the whole time. I tried to stop them, but if I got this kid off my back, then they would hit me from the front, so I just protected myself in a little ball. Then, from above my head, whoa! I heard one of their voices before my sister-in-law slammed one of the kids into the table. The plate shattered and the other kid was thrown halfway across the room onto the sofa. I didn't understand what happened, but when I looked up, my sister-in-law stood there, menacingly. Her kids were aghast. Hey, what are you? My mother-in-law almost got out one last snag before my sister-in-law laid a huge bitch slap onto her. You could feel the shockwave emanate when her palm met her face. She didn't understand what had happened, but she just looked up at my sister-in-law with trembling lips. My sister-in-law ignored that noise and got on her knees, facing me. I'm so sorry. Her face was buried in the ground. She dragged her kids out, now both bawling, and threw them into the yard. She made them sit in the dirt. They eked out an apology while crying. I'm so sorry. You need to stop. My mother-in-law was also crying and trying to stop her, but to no avail. You know that auntie has a baby in her belly, right? You know how many times I've told you to be careful about her belly, right? She started lecturing them as they nodded. I was honestly kind of overwhelmed by her anger, but then I said, Why did you do that? I asked. Grandma told us to. She said that there's a baby and to play pretend with the baby, to make the baby into a bad guy and play with it. She said to go kick the baby and that the baby would have fun. Honestly, I could hear my jaw hit the floor. I was so shocked. I do remember the kids having fun and playing up until that point. Is there a baby in there? It was just the usual. Honestly, getting kicked hurt, and if something happened to the child, I couldn't forgive them. And even though they were told to, they should know better than that. But I can also understand how they wouldn't think twice about what their own grandmother told them. Just like they think that mom and dad are always right, they probably never think that grandma is wrong either. No, it's all a lie. They must have misunderstood me. She was saying something in the corner, but my sister-in-law ignored that too. You really thought the baby would have fun? You guys liked having older boys kicking and hitting you out of the blue? You gonna start being violent towards someone weaker than you? A baby, just because someone told you to? That's just human trash. Grandma is trash too. You guys are all trash, so you guys be her kid. You two aren't my kids anymore. They were bawling their eyes out. Mommy, I'm so sorry. I won't do it again. Please, forgive us. You're apologizing to the wrong person. Again, they apologized. She kept ignoring my mother-in-law, who felt that it was necessary to keep interrupting her. I think she must have been doing this for a whole hour, yelling at them. And then finally, she turned towards her crying mother-in-law. Why did you do that to my kids? Why don't you answer me? You don't like her, so you don't like her kid either? If you want to be a bitch, you be a bitch alone. They may be able to put the didn't know better card, but you sure as hell can't. You made your own grandkids almost become murderers. Do you understand? Tanami and my brother would be parents who had their child murdered. You're seriously the lowest, scummiest human I've ever met. I have to protect my kids from people like you. I'm never having anything to do with you again. I can't forgive you. I actually want to fall off a building thinking about how I was born from you. She gathered her stuff and started getting ready to go home. My mother-in-law kept trying to stop her, but my sister-in-law was also crying and denied all advances to her. Don't touch me! Her kids were also shocked by their mother crying and started crying harder. My mother-in-law was crying, saying, Let me at least fix your knee. She just kept screaming the same thing. After my husband came home, she brought her husband with her and both of them begged for forgiveness on their knees, face kissing the ground. He was mad too, but he couldn't exactly get mad at the twins that were basically manipulated by his own mother. He knew how much their parents would scold them, so he decided to just accept the apology. However, the mother-in-law was the problem. There was the problem of how she was before, and the fact that she used her grandkids' innocence made him mad beyond anything I'd ever seen. He went straight to her house and made a huge scene. I was told to not go to her house and to make sure the baby stays safe. My mother-in-law was chewed out by my father-in-law, my husband, and my sister-in-law, along with her husband and his parents. Oh, my parents too. Her husband threw her out of the house. Luckily, she was able to return back to her own parents' home, but the next day, she was begging for forgiveness at my sister-in-law's house. My brother-in-law ignored her and went to work. My sister-in-law also completely ignored her as well. I was told to be careful as well, and wouldn't you know it, she showed up at my door as well. Not saying a word, she was just on her knees. Pretty terrifying. Not a single word, just not there 1 second and there the next. I'm sure my neighbors were terrified. I was glad that our entrance had a small walkway. I don't know how long she was there, but she was there for at least 9 hours, I think. It was really gross and it's not good for the baby, so I talked to my husband and we decided to move when we got the chance. After we moved, my mother-in-law didn't know where we went, so she kept going to my sister-in-law's place to ask for forgiveness. However, of course she couldn't let it go that she tried to use her kids for murder. So at first, she threw salt at her to chase her off. She kept sitting in front of their house every day, so they called the police where she explained what was going on. She had a restraining order placed on her to avoid anything weird told by my sister-in-law's kids. News of her begging was spread far and wide across the neighborhood, and eventually, everyone knew the reason behind her begging. She's not even able to walk in the neighborhood anymore, but I think that's not enough punishment if you ask me.
At the end of the bubble economy, my company went bankrupt and I became unemployed. I was at a loss at the time because my wife found out she was pregnant. But I was working during the bubble economy, so my salary was high. My wife and I had a lot of money saved up since our hobbies didn't cost a lot of money. I personally had enough savings to get by without a job for about 10 years if I was modest, even with my wife and another person. But my wife's parents and brother didn't think it was a good idea and went crazy when I was going around to job security and other sources trying to get a new job. Divorce him, remarry someone better. He came to my house day after day. It was also a disaster that my brother-in-law had a house built on the same property with a promise to stay there until he got married, at the request of my parents-in-law. My wife and I complained, but he wouldn't listen to us.
Pimp scumbag. Write divorce papers and leave all your money behind. Or die insured.
She cursed at me. My pregnant wife was under a lot of stress, so I approached my parents. My parents, who were angry that they had to take me, the oldest son and heir to the family, responded immediately, although reluctant. But they must have found out about the move, because when I went job hunting and my wife got tired and went to bed, they broke in with a duplicate key. The entire in-laws banded together to restrain my wife. My wife, who had been punched in the stomach by the in-laws, was sent to the obstetrician's office. I got a call that it was almost certain to be a miscarriage, and I rushed to the hospital. But I didn't know what was going on. I was criticized for taking my eyes off my wife at a critical time when my wife was not feeling well. And I was so sorry that I even got down on my knees to my in-laws. But when my wife woke up and found out what had happened, I naturally wanted to kill them all. My wife felt the same. I was not going to let them get away with it, so I took my time to prepare. There was no way they were getting away without a scratch. I asked for an acquaintance to rehire me for a limited time at a major company near my parents-in-law's house, and I didn't tell them about the limited time part. When I entered the company housing there, I took most of the furniture and valuables from our house and sent them to my parents' house and said thank you to my in-laws for taking care of me. They gave me a 3-night hot spring trip, and I was ready to go. While the in-laws were away, I borrowed a large piece of heavy machinery from my former employer and cleared the site of my parents-in-law's house in about 2 days. All the furniture in my parents-in-law's house is under the rubble. my wife took steps to shut down the gas, water, and electricity while disconnecting everything with the skills she had acquired at her previous job. The companies were very angry since they agreed after the fact.
His brother-in-law is building a new house, so we cleared the land.
I told them. I was treated like a Masuo, even though I wasn't his son-in-law, and I still did my best. But it was not worth it. So I leaked the whole thing about my wife and everything else. When I told them about my wife, everyone who listened to me changed color. Everybody knew that my wife was pregnant, because we're neighbors, but my in-laws told people she had a miscarriage because of my constant abuse of her. Those who were told the truth by my wife instead. How could they do such a devilish thing?
They're insane.
They were furious.
What a horrible thing to do.
Some of them were crying and caring for my wife, and I said goodbye and thank you to them at the end. I then apologized to the mediator and reported that I would cut off all further contact with my wife's parents' family. I heard that my parents also sent a letter of severance to my in-laws in a sealed envelope. I heard that the in-laws were very upset when they got home, but the neighbors ignored them because of what they did to my wife. Rather, the terrible treatment of my wife by my in-laws spread quickly through the mouths of our neighbors. An acquaintance who lived in the same town went out of his way to tell me that the whole town knew about the bad behavior. And if they tried to come over to our company housing, the company doesn't actually have company housing. And on top of that, the bad behavior was exposed here as well, and they were so heartbroken that they said they were going away someplace far with their wife. There was no company housing. I had no idea where they were going, because their contracts had expired, and I had reported them to my father-in-law and brother-in-law's employers, so they both lost their jobs. They were very stubborn about it, but... Oh, lucky you're not being sued out of family courtesy. I heard they were cut off. He called my parents' house as a last resort, but my dad, who rarely loses his temper. I heard what you guys did to my son's wife. I'm so furious that I could beat you to death, so I'm gonna cut you off. He shouted and immediately hung up. My parents were in a state of first grandchild fever, and they told my parents that my wife was pregnant. They were thinking about what to give her as a baby gift. My parents were devastated by the miscarriage and the treatment they received from their relatives. My mother cried herself to sleep for a while. For the parents, it was not possible for the child to be born. But the child in her belly was already a grandchild and a family member to them. They lost that family due to the cruelty of their own relatives. It was natural for my father to feel the same way as me. After my wife and I came to my parents' house, my mother hugged her tightly. My wife, who had been holding back because she thought I might blame myself if she cried, was sobbing in my mother's arms. My wife didn't seem to consider her family as family anymore, and started treating my parents as if they were her own. I overheard that after my wife and I were gone, my in-laws lost their house and everything, bought an apartment with old furniture from a recycle store, and the three of them were living there. Just because my wife's story is so outrageous that it spread all over town. Every time my brother-in-law brings her girlfriend.
If you marry into this family and they don't like you, they'll kill your baby if you get pregnant. Because that's what they did to my own daughter's baby.
And the old ladies in the neighborhood will gossip about it and run. My brother-in-law has not only been single all his life, but he can't even get a girlfriend anymore. Urgh! No matter how mad he gets, we are not there for him, because there is no excuse for what he did. Because of all this, it made it hard for them to live there, and I heard they moved somewhere again. But I found out through a relative that my mother-in-law had passed away. The relatives had heard about what they did to my wife, so they reported it to my wife. But they told her that she could decide for herself whether or not to attend the funeral. My wife has no intention of going. I heard when my mother-in-law passed away, my father-in-law looked like a shadow of his former self. His clothes were in tatters, and he seemed to barely make it through each day. My brother-in-law laments the fact that no matter where he goes, he can't be happy, because of what he's done. He can't get a part-time job, he can't afford to eat, and he was arrested for stealing. For my wife, that's a memory she would like to forget. But she can't seem to do that, because if she does, she'll also forget the existence of the child in her belly. He was certainly alive. But I know that's a burden I'll have to carry with me for the rest of my life, because I couldn't protect her. I moved back home and took over my parents' business, which was an independent business. I left the technical side of the business in the hands of my father and the craftsman, and I took over the management of the business. My father's skills were top-notch, but his management was not so good. And when he and I split the business took off, and we took the opportunity to build a 2-family house, including an office. My wife seems to get along with my parents, and she relies on them. My parents were very fond of her as well. After that, we had our second child. My wife and I were happy, of course, but my parents were happier. When she was in the stable period, we had a big party with all the employees of the company, and we all prayed for my wife's birth. Thanks in part to that, my wife gave birth to a healthy baby boy. 2 years later, she gave birth to twin girls, and our family became lively all at once. When it came time to name the children, we thought we'd name one after our first child.
What should we do?
My mother, who happened to hear that.
That name belongs to a child in heaven. Wouldn't you feel bad?
My wife and I were convinced. You're right. And we still keep the name of our first child in our hearts. These children are now all grown up, and the older one will enter elementary school this year. All 3 of them, including the youngest, have grown up healthy without a single illness. I think it's thanks to our child who's still watching over us from heaven.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. What did you think of today's episode? Leave a comment and let me know your thoughts on today's story. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe.